Okay. Good, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our town hall. I'm Pam McElvain, CEO of P&L Group and host of the Inclusive Voice, WCPT 820 AM, Chicago Progressive Talk. I am grateful you're here with us today as we celebrate Black History Month and honor the legacy that continues to call of all of us to a higher power, purpose, deeper courage, and meaningful action that we should take. But before we begin, I would like us to give sincere thanks to our sponsors and our team who helped make this possible. We want to thank UPMC as our host sponsor and Dynasty Media as our media partner who will amplify this program to millions around the globe. So we appreciate and value your partnerships and commitments to supporting this conversation and strengthening communities in the workplaces to advance inclusion. Now, I would really like to pause to acknowledge the passing of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. and the powerful legacy he leaves behind, a life of faith, justice, and advocacy that will be remembered for generations to come. As we gather today, let's be clear, we're celebrating not a day off, but a day on, a day to be deliberate about giving back and serving others. So let's pause for a moment. Black History Month is not only a time to look back, it's a time to look around and to look ahead. We reflect on extraordinary contributions of Black leaders, creators, educators, and organizers, and of course, everyday people. To be there for resilience and actually bring forward brilliance that have shaped our country and strengthened our communities, our families, our connectors with other people. As we acknowledge this truth, this month invites us to do more than just remember. It asks us to recommit to equity, to opportunity, and to building cultures where people can thrive, lead, and belong. I also want to share with you an exciting milestone that we move into our new normal. Now, for more than 20 years, you've known us as Diversity MBA. And now we're proud to say we have introducing our new brand, Promena Set the Standard. Yep, you heard it here. You know, Nike just do it. Well, we're Promena Set the Standard. We've been setting the standard for more than 20 years. And with this new brand, we get to recommit, we get to grow, expound, to be extraordinary in our own spaces and bring others in to expand our vision and strengthen leadership and deepen learning across the world and provide opportunities where there normally isn't any. So you'll be hearing about Promena Set the Standard going forward. You know, we're really excited, our team, about this new brand and what it means. But now it's time to honor and to recognize and introduce our featured guest. My heart is filled. So God makes things possible for me that I don't know, and he's made yet another one. Martin Luther King III is a lifelong human rights advocate who has carried forward a commitment to justice, not as a symbol, but as a responsibility. He has served in public leadership roles across the world, including as the fourth president of the Southern Christian Leadership Council Conference, where he helped lead initiatives on community action, civil rights, community engagement at the individual level. He has contributed that work through philanthropy, advocacy, and efforts that promote nonviolence and human dignity, reminding us that leadership is measured by what we build, who we protect, and how we show up when it's hard. And I'm especially excited, really good book. I mean, it's a page turner, to share with you his newly released book, What is My Legacy? A powerful reflection of how we move beyond simply inheriting history to actively living it, and how each of us can, really shape a more connected, compassionate, and just future. In your chat, you actually will be able to press the link and order real time, What is My Legacy? And by the time you finish this conversation, you're going to want to have a copy. I do have a signed copy, but you too, at some point in life, can connect where Martin Luther King III will show up. But anyway, we'll be chatting more about Mr. King's legacy, what that means, and he'll share with us in this moment, real time, leadership within our communities and our workplaces, what we need to know and how we can translate that into who we are and how we want to impact, not someday, our community and each other, but today. So thank you all for your commitment of time, for being here, bringing your attention and your heart to this conversation in this town hall. So please join me and share comments in the chat that you would like to have us look at, as well as questions in the Q&A. And at the end of the program, we'll definitely take some of those. So please join me in welcoming Martin Luther King III to our first, actually, this is our first annual Black History Town Hall celebration. So thank you, Mr. King, for being here with us this afternoon.
Thank you. It is an extraordinary honor to have an opportunity to share at this particular time in the history of our nation, certainly as it relates to African American history, but as it relates to the passing of one of the giants of our movement, the modern civil rights movement, Reverend Jesse Jackson. First of all, to his wife and family, my condolences have already been shared, and I think we need to continue to talk about the real changes that need to happen in our nation and really throughout our world. The United States represents so much of the leadership of the world. There's an old saying, so goes America, so goes the world. Perhaps my initial feeling is we are not living up to that mantra. People are feeling like they are being forced to follow the lead of America, and you should only follow someone's lead if that lead is right for the nation and the world. In some ways, there's leadership that is great, but in other ways, there's leadership that is dramatically creating a huge division in the world. And so, as I join you today, in a nation that its leadership, political leadership specifically, is attempting to write out the history of people of color, but specifically Black people, but not just Blacks. In any history that they don't approve of, they are trying to remove. It is said that a nation that does not remember its history is doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. We need to think about that. And then we need to also make sure that we uplift and really promote our history, not just for our children as Black Americans, but for all of the children of the world. For when the full truth is known, there's a saying, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And so we must always be advocates of truth, whether the truth is painful or not. It's important that all people understand the history. Well, certainly all who purport to be American need to understand the history of America, but hopefully others in the world would be interested in the history of America. And so I know there are additional questions, so maybe I'll stop because I could go on and on and on, but I'm so honored to have this opportunity to share today.
Well, thank you so much for giving us that reflection and also sharing the responsibility of America. If we're going to position and be the leaders of the world, we have to be responsible. So thank you for that. And please feel free throughout this conversation, Mr. Martin, to reflect back and any things that was reminded with your experiences and impact with Reverend Jesse Jackson Jr., as well as the late Dr. Martin Luther King Sr. please feel free to, Senior, Jesse
Yeah,
Jackson
yes,
Senior,
of course.
and Reverend Martin Luther King
Mhm.
Jr. come back with that. But one of the things you talked about in your book, you opened up and said, to heal a world in crisis, we must rethink legacy and commit to something bigger than ourselves. That is so powerful, that statement, but also in reflecting and telling us what inspired you to now publish My Legacy, and share with the world what that really means.
So our hope, and when I say our, I mean myself, my wife, and our two co-authors, um, is to inspire us to consider and think about legacy in a different way. Oftentimes, when we look at legacy, it's a moving target, and largely we're working toward the end of our lives when we look back at what we did throughout our lives, and then it may manifest itself in accumulating a lot of wealth that you can pass on to the generations of the future. It may mean being honored by putting your name being put on a building or on a street, on a school, or it means what you did that caused you to uh, be in a position to achieve what some would define as greatness. But that's not the full, in my judgment, extent of what legacy is. Legacy really is what you do every day. And the fact of the matter is, each and every person has a legacy. Um, Even, if you say, well, my legacy is not monumental, but it's monumental to you. I think you have to look at, this is what I've chosen to do. This is the path I've chosen. Some it will be in service, and I think that that's a huge part of legacy. My own legacy is so massive that it's sometimes hard to not digest, but it's hard to realize what my father and mother um, chose to do to advance the modern society. And, it's not complete. The work Dad came to a head, obviously, in 1963 when Dad delivered on August 28th one of the most iconic messages ever delivered, entitled the I Have a Dream speech, and where he shared his vision for our nation and world. And that vision is so broad that it encompasses really almost everybody on the planet if you choose to. And many have listened, millions and millions around the world. If they don't know anything else about Martin Luther King, they know the I Have a Dream speech. Now, um, I'm not suggesting that every last one of us will have a legacy of that type. But what is important is that every one of us has a legacy. And it certainly is what you deposit into society, what you deposit maybe into family, what you deposit, in your community. And I have a favorite quote that I often refer to, and that quote is that a quote that I saw first on the walls of the school my mother, undergraduate school, attended, which is Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And that quote is by the educator Horace Mann, which is, be ashamed to die until you've won a victory for humanity. I was probably 13, 14 years old when my mom first took me and my siblings to Antioch. And I ended up going another half a dozen times. And over the years, when I first read those words on that inscription, I was like, oh my gosh, how do you do that? How, I mean, if I had corporation that hired 100,000 people, it becomes really easy because you're helping to empower hundreds of thousands of people. But what that means is, and I had to break it down. Again, be ashamed to die until you've won a victory for humanity. You see, we can win a victory in our neighborhood or on our street. We can win a victory in our schools. Some of us may win victories in our city. Some may win victories in our states. Some may win victories in our nation. And then, yet better, some may also win victories in our world. All those words mean it's important to think about, you may not be able to change the world, but you can do a little something to make the world in which we all must live a little better than it was when you arrived. And in a real sense, that's also a part of what legacy means, what it means to build a legacy, what it means. And if you don't look at it that way, it's all perspective, because if you don't look at it and feel like what you may do or can do is important, even if it's not important to everybody, it's important to somebody. It's important to your family. It's important to you. So I hope that's how we begin to reframe what legacy is. It does not have to be a monumental legacy, but it is something that you build and work on every day, almost every day of your life.
Wow, that's so powerful. And when I think of one of the things that you were saying, you're talking about legacies we've inherited. Mr. King, you were saying you can't really know where you're going until you know where you've been. And sometimes, it seems to be, share with us, how do we really reflect in an honest, authentic way when we're in an environment that is constantly, challenging us to really go back to what you're talking about, do the daily impacts to build your legacy.
So there are things that all of us can and maybe should consider doing. And I'll start with number one: when you're around toxicity, whether it's a toxic person, whether it's a toxic community, a toxic nation, sometimes instead of engaging in the toxicity, you need to shut it down. It's like, I can't watch the news every day. I can't scroll on social media. Well, these are choices, by the way. I mean, you can choose to stay mired in all of that negativity, or you can choose to say, I'm going to take a break so that I can revitalize self, which means really thinking about and reflecting on the community or the neighborhood or the school that I want to create or want to help create, want to help be a part of creating. And that sometimes manifests itself through, meditating. It manifests itself through listening to positive, uplifting messages. Oftentimes, our pastors provide that to some degree, but it really is, you have to reinforce it yourself. I learned a lot of invaluable lessons in church, but it was reinforced by my mother and father at home. More so my mother, just because of the longevity. Dad was only in my life for 10 years. So as I began to grow older in my young teens, I had to go back and listen to his sermons and his messages and derive inspiration from what he was teaching, because I didn't get to learn it in a one-on-one session. Although I did, excuse me, sorry about a dog barking, but I did get to actually listen and learn, and I continue to learn, because many of the things that Dad articulated are still very prevalent and relevant to this day. So, life is a learning process. Probably the day you stop learning, you probably are no longer here in the physical sense. But you can learn something every day and learn something from anyone. It does not have to be always this great scholar or thought leader. It does not have to be an elected official. You can learn something from watching how children interact. And that's what is the beauty of life, and the beauty of who we are as human beings. We really are God's highest creation. Now, what ends up happening oftentimes is we don't recognize always that. And so we respond, for example, to conflict and crisis. We respond like lower animal forms. You never seen a group of monkeys talking about, Martin Luther King or Harriet Tubman or Sojourner Truth or Malcolm X or Medgar Evers or Plato, Shakespeare, Euripides. They don't have that ability. You've never seen a group of cats, talking about I'm Democrat, I'm Republican, I'm independent. They don't have that ability. You've never seen a group of dogs talking about I'm Christian, I'm Muslim, I'm Hindu, I'm Buddhist, I'm atheist, I'm agnostic. They don't have that ability. But humankind, God's highest creation, has the ability to sift through information and to reason and to think. And yet, when we get ready to resolve conflict, we resort to lower animal means. Well, I'm gonna pick up something and hit him, or I'm gonna get a gun and shoot him. All of these devastating things that if, there are many people probably in jail today who, had they stopped for just a moment and thought about it, they may not have carried out the act that they engaged in, and therefore probably would not, on that issue, be in jail. They might be free. So we have this ability, and we have the ability to conduct ourselves in a disciplined manner. But sometimes we do not, because our emotions take over and they cause us to go into a different direction. And so I guess I'm not saying that any of us will ever be perfect, because we maybe cannot, but all of us can work on becoming our best selves, whatever that means and whatever that is to us, being better. And again, as I said, that's why sometimes I just turn the television off. I turn my phone off sometimes, because I can't keep going through this negative. And it's being promoted. It's being promoted by some of our leadership. And so we are embracing that. Dad used nonviolence as an ends to a means. And, he taught us how to disagree without being disagreeable. The one commodity that has been temporarily lost in our society is civility. Humankind should never lose civility. It should never lose humanity. We were losing our humanity. And so I always have to turn inward to be able to go externally, inward to reinforce, to regain a fortitudeness, an ability to be resilient, to be able to bend but not break. Resilience is what's needed. In fact, that's the kind of leadership that Reverend Jackson exhibited, resilience, because so many times we have been beaten down and kicked down and pushed down. But resilience gives you the capacity to rise above. And also, sometimes you really do have to move to a level that it gets above the noise, because you could stay down in the gutter with the noise and not be contributing anything. But if you're able to find a way to rise above the noise, then maybe people will hear a message. Let me give you this example. I have listened to the I Have a Dream speech hundreds and thousands of times, but I've only heard it maybe 100. And let me explain that further. Because, we listen with our ears, but we hear with our heart. And whenever I am listening and hear I Have a Dream, I'm brought to tears. And so, again, it's about heart space. There's something about that message that opens the heart, opens the mind, and causes us to do better. They say a simple phrase, when you know better, you do better. Well, I don't know if that's always true, but I try to always listen and hear and then do better.
You know, what you said, which is really powerful, like listening to your father's speech, I have a dream. You know, every time I might watch something or hear something again, I'm open to learning something new. So you're absolutely right about that. And one of the things that you talked about in your book, you said what we do and keep and what we do and what do we keep and what do we transform? I was picking up some of that as you were talking, but now I'm explicitly asking you, what do we keep and what do we transform?
So, when you think about what do you keep, again, that's why I go back to history. We've got to know and understand our history for us to move forward and not continue the cycle of the same thing over and over. So as we are thinking that, we're transforming to a higher level, transforming to more. It's about consciousness and really finding that deep level of consciousness, because again, consciousness is the old. When you know better, in theory you should do better. Um, I don't know that. I think we're going through a very tough time in our nation and world, and I do put a lot of I don't want to just say blame, but I put a lot on leadership, because if leadership is different, the people also perhaps engage differently. So instead of saying this is not good and not embracing it, we subconsciously are embracing the wrong kind of things. And so the kind of things we're embracing will only cause us to be stagnant and not make any movement. We've got to do something differently. That old saying, if you want to get a different result, you don't keep doing the same thing. You got to do something different. And that means even engaging in a system. We have a system, a democratic system that has worked. There'd be debates about whether it's worked at the maximum, because your system can always be better. But it's almost like capitalism. Capitalism has worked for a lot of us, but it doesn't really work as well for everyone, because capitalism it may be one of the best systems that exists, but even it could be moderated or modified. And what I mean by that is capitalism inherently has to have an underclass, someone to oppress. And so a lot of people are going to make and have made and are making a lot of money. I think that's wonderful. I want people to have as much as they can. But I also want to figure out, how do we lift the quality of life for masses of people, whether it's around healthcare, whether it's around, around a decent job, a decent pay. In fact, in 1966, my dad was talking about a decent wage. He was talking about a living wage. We're still trying to get the minimum wage raised in many communities. And, in a nation that has a multi-trillion-dollar economy, how do we justify this? I mean, I'm like, this is unacceptable. I mean, in America, we have almost 100 million people living at the poverty level or in poverty. And that doesn't make any sense, except for resources are being directed to just a small percentage of the people. It seems like, and let me just say this, I'm going to put it out here so that people understand. Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't killed because he was talking about us riding in the front of buses or being able to go and get a hamburger. He was killed because he started talking about a radical redistribution of wealth. Now, he wasn't talking about, if you are wealthy, taking your money and giving it to somebody else, but he was talking about how we spent government dollars. So $1 billion, this is hypothetical, may 500,000 jobs if they are transit jobs. But if they're engineers, it may only create 25,000 jobs because engineers make far more money. But he was talking about a fair and equitable system of justice for all and treating people with dignity and respect. And that's kind of where we need to be today, because we do not treat people with dignity and respect. We do not pay people a decent living wage. Again, this is 1959, 59, 60 years ago when he was talking about a living wage. And as I said, we're still trying to get the minimum wage addressed to a more palatable amount so that people can take care of themselves and their families. It's that old notion. And I think I'm very concerned at this particular point and moment in history because technology is replacing people. AI is phenomenal. It is incredible what it can do. But robots can also replace people. So when you look at the industries like, the Uber and Lyft and all these companies that have to hire drivers, and even truck drivers, all of that in the next few years will be gone because we have these cars now that drive themselves. And so that's hundreds of thousands of jobs that will be gone. So the question I wonder and have is, who is thinking about how are we going to make ends meet if the manufacturing is gone and has been replaced? I have associates that I know who have these major manufacturing plants, and those plants used to take 10 or 15,000 people to work them. And now maybe 10 people is all that's needed. So we got some big challenges ahead. And the only way we're going to resolve those is we're going to have to come together in a collective fashion to figure out, okay, what opportunities can exist so that people can take care of themselves and their families.
You opened, as they say, a can of worms. You actually opened a tank. And we definitely could go down this path and really talk a lot more about this because, we all understand, there's a few that's controlling the many. And what you're talking about is something, but how could your 100 million volunteer hours, this movement that you and your family are driving for up to 2029, help maybe shape some of what you're talking about in the economic, disparities that exist with this many people coming together to volunteer? And I know we're talking servant leadership, but the impact of the number of folks giving back, what that could mean, and what some of your intent and vision is around that.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that question, because I want to share why and how my wife and I came up with the concept. Now, Dad has always talked as a minister and often shared that he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. And what we knew was that 3-4 years ago, I guess it's probably been 3 years now when we started talking about it. And we knew that 2 or 3 years after we started talking about it, there was going to be an election. And regardless if Vice President Harris had won or if President Trump won, we were going to be a nation that was about 50% divided. And so we wanted to create an opportunity for us first to begin to come together. And when you're working on something bigger than yourself, there are hundreds of service opportunities, literally. There may even be thousands that are listed on our website that you can engage in. And we want people to come and engage in what is close to their heart, because of what we know. In other words, we're not saying to people, go out there and paint this building. If that's what you enjoy doing, that is what you ought to do. If you enjoy helping and tutoring kids, that's what you ought to do. If you enjoy working with seniors, that's what you ought to do. If you enjoy doing a coat drive or a clothing drive, because, we wanted to make service also available. If you are in a underserved community and a very impoverished community, you may not have the ability, may not have a car, you're on public transportation. So to get to a site to serve may take you using 3 buses. But what we're saying is, look, in your community where you live, there are kids. So some of those kids may need help with tutoring. That's an hour of volunteering to say, I'm going to help these kids in math or in science, or if that's what you're good at. If, when as we all growing, getting, as a child, you're growing from one stage to the other, you may want to say, well, we can have a coat drive in the complex because my clothes are no longer, I can't wear them. So I will pass them on. There are all kinds of ways to serve. But the first thing is you're also engaging in dialogue. So you're not talking about something political that you may or may not agree on. A political conversation, while it's great to have, it may not always be a conversation that we will all agree on. There are certain things that we may, but other things we won't. So I think that the goal of when you're working on something, there are other people just like you happen to be interested in that one area. So you begin a dialogue. And once you find one area you agree on, you may be able to then go to another area and you build onto that and build onto that relationship. People make friends that way. So this objective, this 100 million hours called Realize the Dream, and I want to encourage people to at least go to realizethedream.org and look at the website. And then you can begin to see, well, I know I can fit in this concept because I'm doing something that is good for the community. Now, what studies have shown is, yes, it may give you, if you're doing something good, you personally will get a dopamine rush because you feel good about helping society or helping your community or helping your church or helping your school. But what has been proven now through data is that others who see even an act of service, they start getting a dopamine rush and start feeling better about themselves. So in a real sense, it's transforming the whole society by doing an hour of service. And again, our goal is at least 100 million hours. In fact, we have already 25 million service hours, but we're going to get to 100 and maybe beyond. I think that once we're able to achieve over 100 million hours of service, it begins to transform society because everybody is doing a little bit to help out, to make a difference. Now, again, that was a part of Dad's mission. Of course, he had a policy, he and his team developed policy initiatives so that in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was signed, that legislation. And it was a policy initiative which gave us citizenship. And then in 1965, the Voting Rights Act was signed, which gave us the legitimate and legal right to vote. And then in 1968, fair housing legislation was signed. And the reality is all of these things we're still working on. They're not exactly where they need to be. I mean, unfortunately, discrimination is still real. Dad identified something he defined as the triple evils. He wanted to work to eradicate the evil of poverty, the evil of racism, and the evil of violence. He used the word militarism. So we're still working to eradicate the triple evils. I believe this initiative, Realize the Dream, is going to help move us in a direction so we can, in fact, eradicate. Now, there are some who say, well, the poor are going to always be with us, but we can reduce it dramatically, if not eliminate it. If our objective was to eliminate, we could do that. We just have not identified that as the goal. But, through the organizations I work with, whether it is the Drum Major Institute or the Martin Luther King III Foundation or even the King Center, all these organizations, there is a mission that we are working to eradicate these triple evils from our society, which is what my dad wanted to do. My mom throughout her life wanted to do. And many others are working with us as we build this vast coalition. It's not one person, so you don't have to feel like all the weight is on you or one person's shoulders. it is us working collectively. And when we learn that, and when we realize that it's not even about getting credit, you may get some credit for doing this. But if you're not concerned about who gets the credit, you could probably change the world.
Yes, yeah, your site is beautiful. I have the guidebook and we're definitely going to implement it. And I like the 16 minutes. What I love, um, um, Mr. King, is if we could in the media as well as in social track those hours and help accelerate everyone to want to help you get to 100 million, maybe before 29, because it's so simple and the way you've laid it out, you and your wife, the way you guys have laid it out and positioned it allows us in every day what we do is to get and organizations can join and be a part of this movement in recognition of what you're doing. So, okay. So
I'm
I want
glad you said that because I do want to say our partners, some
to,
of our
okay.
partners are the NBA, the NFL, MLB. We went to an event in Dallas this weekend dealing with the United States Tennis Foundation and a program that Arthur Ashe started and is going on today teaching underserved communities how to play the game of tennis. But it's not just tennis because there also is a component about becoming mastering your academic pursuit. So it's all connected. But then we also have Allstate and DoorDash and Scholastic and the teachers unions. Over 2 million teachers have joined our effort. But as you say, anyone, small businesses can join. Any and everyone can join this initiative that is going to make our nation a better nation, and hopefully it will extend into the world.
Well, let me ask you right now, real time, to do a live invitation to the Fortune 500 companies, employee resource groups who millions contribute and give back every day to join you. Real
So,
time.
okay, let me first of all say we are in touch with many in corporate America, and honestly, let me say this initiative is not it should not be defined as some has as a DEI initiative. Now, I totally disagree with anyone, including the president, who said last night that we have totally dismantled DEI. Well, you're really dismantling not just your history, but your potential to continue to be a great nation, because it is the diversity of perspective, the diversity of of those being left out that potentially can make this an even greater nation. We don't know what next scientist is going to come up with an issue. And it's not one ethnic group that does it. It really is every ethnic group. So why you would be condemning diversity is a sad commentary under the aegises of it being race baiting and race whatever. So I I am against what is being said and the rhetoric. And I hope that more and more people come to that conclusion that the diversity of this nation has made this nation great. And if it wants to sustain its greatness, it's going to have to, at some point, re-engage in its diversity. Now, that being said, I want to share this, and then I'm going to make the invite.
Thank you
When
for
you,
that.
oh, certainly. Thank you. When you think about Martin Luther King, you automatically go to, well, that's diversity because you're talking about black folk. Well, Dad was talking about poor folk. Dad was talking about people who left out, whether it's Native Americans, whether it's Latino, Hispanic Americans, whether it's Black Americans, whether it's, smaller groups of people who have been left out. And, if we are a righteous and just society, we should not leave out anyone. We don't have a person to lose, is the way I look at it. Whether we're talking about something around violence or whether we're in any capacity, we really don't have a human. We want to engage every human being who wants to be engaged. And I'm saying that to say that some of the corporations we've gone into recently they have looked at us as DEI. And I've had to say, well, we're not DEI. We're talking about bringing America together. And that does not matter what your ethnicity is. So you're mischaracterizing us. They are using that as an excuse not to participate, is what I'm saying. So I want to pull the veil off and ask the Fortune 500 companies, particularly, and a number of them are participating, but our invitation is to each and every one, because this is going to make America better for all Americans, not just one group of people. And if you're against that, then I don't know what else to say to you. I feel very sad that is you have a jaded and a limited perspective as opposed to an unlimited. It's just like in the world, there really is abundance. That's why we shouldn't, even though there's 8+ billion people on the planet, we shouldn't have poor folk. Certainly not in the United States, where we have a multi-trillion-dollar economy. And yet we have the audacity to have poor folk. Now, the answer is not just to take money and give it to people. That may be a part of the answer, a small part. But it really is to infuse ingenuity, to infuse information, to help create the climate where people can lift themselves up. You know, Dad used to say something like, we love to be able to lift ourselves up by our own bootstraps, but it's cruel just to say to a bootless person, lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. So we got to create the opportunity for boots. We got to create the climate that does not just give a man a fish, but teach people to fish so that they can feed themselves and their families. That's the environment that, potentially can come from what the Realize the Dream initiative is doing.
I, thank you for the work you're doing. And so I'm thinking, when I think of what organizations call employee resource groups, they call them interest groups, they call them networks, they call them business resource groups. Mr. King, they call them these groups that help with internal cultural change, and they help with major community impact. So 98% of the corporations have some type of group like this within their organization. And 100% of them, of that 98%, are giving back to the community. So why not be a part of your positive collective movement? Why not? Because diversity is the dimensions of difference, as you just stated. So maybe we got to talk to them differently and help them through it differently, but they're doing it and broaden their understanding. So with that, I'm going to be done and shift over and ask you to share with us a story that we don't know, can't read about, that influenced you when you were growing up and had both your parents, and maybe a little later after you were 10, but something that you think would be good to know and take away from this audience that's listening.
So, like most of us, our parents, and in my life, grandparents, influenced me greatly. I have to give a very public example. One of these examples you don't know about. Everyone knows that when I was 10 years old, well, you may not know the age, but knows that at some point in history, back in the late 60s, Dad was killed. Most people do know that. What most people don't know is that my grandmother, my father's mother, Alberta Williams King, was also assassinated in the church while praying the Lord's Prayer. So one of my lessons was, first of all, at 10 years old, I didn't know what we were going to do when Dad was killed, because our lives changed dramatically. And I might add a little bit more dimension, because I happened to be told about Dad's shooting. I'll say shooting initially, because he didn't die first. I mean, he didn't die immediately. It was maybe about an hour after he had been shot. But I learned about it, my siblings and I, by watching television and watching the evening news about 7:05 Eastern Standard Time, 6:05 Memphis time, where he was, that Dr. King has just been shot. So at that moment, my siblings and I ran back because we were in the front of the house, the living room, watching the news, evening news. We always watch the news, good, bad, or indifferent. Today, I would say bad and indifferent. Uh, but you do need to know what's going on. So we ran back, and mom was preparing to go to Memphis. She had received a call from Ambassador Andrew Young and Jesse Jackson. And so she was preparing to go to Memphis, and she did get to the airport. And once she got there, she was told that by the mayor of the city of Atlanta that Dr. King did not survive. So she came back home and said, I must go spend time with my children. And she had conversations with each of us. Actually, I'm sorry, my youngest sister, Bernice, was already asleep. So it was Dexter, my late brother Dexter, and my late sister Yolanda, and myself. And we asked a myriad of questions. Even at that time, mother was helping us because Yolanda asked a question: should I hate the man that killed my daddy? Understanding that dad had been teaching us love and forgiveness. So mom consistently advocated for love and forgiveness. Now, about a year later, this was in 1969, my father's brother mysteriously drowned because he'd been raising questions about his brother and wanted to understand how he was killed. Because even back then, it was known that whatever the story was they were saying, like James Earl Ray killed Dr. King, that just was not true. But it was sort of inferred that that wasn't true back then. So again, my uncle was asking questions and ended up drowning mysteriously, although he was an avid and very good swimmer. Then in 1974, my grandmother was killed in the church. Now, this was shown, or when my uncle drowned, we were out of the country and in Jamaica. And it was heard over the radio that Dr. King's brother, Reverend A.D. Williams King, was found drowned in his pool. And it was like a news break. Now you look at the news, there's a news flash every 5 minutes. So it's like, you've kind of made it not significant. Back then it was significant. In 1974, I was in Washington, D.C., and I was working as a page for Senator Ted Edward Kennedy. And I was at the home of Andrew Young's chief of staff. Andrew Young was a congressman. And it came across the news flash, special bulletin. Dr. Martin Luther King Sr.'s wife has just been shot. And they may have said killed. I think she didn't die right away also, but she was killed, shot, and assassinated. So for many years, every time I heard the news flash, my whole body would shake, and I would become very afraid because I thought something else had happened to my family. Thank God, I mean, good, bad, or indifferent, and that was terrible. It was not just my family, obviously, but that's the kind of trauma that was created that I had to ultimately get over. That, it isn't about your family. Nothing has happened to your family. But here's the lesson. My grandfather lost his sons, and his wife. And he had preached love, redemption, forgiveness. It's one thing to preach it. It's another thing to practice. And what he said was, I refuse to allow any person to reduce me to hatred. The man that killed my lovely wife, nor the man that killed my sons. I love everybody. I'm every man's brother. My point is, I had to learn how to forgive. because it would have been easy for me to embrace hatred. And that was reinforced by my mother, by my aunts and uncles, by everyone. And that was an invaluable lesson because I try to share that with kids. I'm not telling you that you have to do this, but I am saying this is what worked for me. So I never embraced hatred. I never hated James Earl Ray. I never hated Marcus Wayne Chenault. We hadn't learned who might have been responsible for my uncle's death. But hate just was not something we chose. We chose love. We chose forgiveness. And so that's one of the most invaluable lessons that I have to share because I try to show up every day in love. I try to deposit positive things into the universe and not something negative.
Sure. And so one of the things I do every day, um, Mr. King, is ask God, if I want grace from God, I have to give grace.
Mhm.
Right?
Amen.
We have to, and so what you're doing, the pause is the mindset now. So let's take spirituality and religion out of it for those that may have a different view on it. But it's the mindset and it's the commitment one makes to themselves in terms of they're going to embody hate or not. And the way you're talking, about what you went through and your grandfather, I mean, that takes an extraordinary amount of strength and resilience and uniqueness. So this has been an incredible conversation and learning. And you said so many things. And so I'm going to ask you to drill down one more time as we close. You've given definitely many of our listeners actions, what they can do to be a part of a movement. You actually are inviting folks to be a part of the movement and do something they actually love. They
That's right.
don't have to go protest. They can do something they love and be a part of the contribution of a major movement globally because you have global representation. And you've been unapologetic in your truth. So we can take that with us. And thank you for that. You've given us something tangible with what is my legacy. And I encourage folks to not only buy it, but use it as a guide, as a resource. And that's how I've gone back and referred to some of the great nuggets you've given to us. But as we leave from having this, incredible experience with you, what mantra that you have that you leave with us that we could carry on to continue to be, you said it, the best we can possibly be, but what advice would you give those of us to continue to move forward in what we believe in?
The thing I try to say is show up in love. Now, I'm not talking about the sentimental kind of love. My father did a sermon called Levels of Love, where he talked about the 5 or 6 levels. He said the lowest level is utilitarian love. You only love someone as long as you can use them. And when that use runs out, you love them no more. We shouldn't embrace that, he said. He said there's another level of love called romantic love, which is phenomenal. The love we have for our life partners, for our wives, for our husband, the love we have for our girlfriends. That's beautiful, but that's not the highest. He talked about mother's love, which is so amazing. Most of us as men, we think we love our children, and we do, but we may not have the capacity to love as strong as a mother who delivers the child, but who carries the child for 9 months. But it's a beautiful kind of love. You talked about humanitarian love. That's a wonderful kind of love, but you kind of love everything in general and nothing in particular. So that's not the highest. He talked about friendship love, which is beautiful, but you love your friend because your friend loved you. Then he talked about the highest, defined by the word agape. You love someone if they're old, young, rich, poor, black, white, Native American, Latino, Hispanic American, Asian American, African, no matter who they are, you love them because you know that God calls you to do that. And that's the kind of love we need to transform our world. And all of us can actually engage in that kind of love because it is something not only that's needed, but it is something that will be transformative. That's the spirit we come to Realize the Dream Initiative with that spirit to create that love that is and it can be sustainable. Now, it doesn't mean we're not going to make mistakes. It does not mean we're going to again be perfect, because we as humans will not be perfect. But you have to always, Dr. Benjamin Mays used to have a full quote, and I can't pull it right now, but something like low aim is sin, not failure. You may fall 10 times, but you got to keep getting back up. Every successful entrepreneur, every successful person may have failed 100 times, but they didn't give up, they didn't give out, they didn't give in. They kept moving forward. And that's what we have to do in our lives. We have to hold on, stay focused, and understand that life can be ups and downs. Our goal is to have far more ups than we do downs, and to create what Dad would have called the beloved community. That's what he and Mom dedicated their lives to, trying to create a model that all of us can embrace and follow.
So with that, you all heard it in very simple terms from Martin Luther King III. Be true to yourself, lean in to love, and don't define anyone or anything, just absorb it. Thank you, Mr. King. This has been a phenomenal opportunity for us yet to talk with you again, to hear you again, for have you share with us. That will stay with us in both our hearts and minds. The sacrifice of time for those that have joined us, and for you for sharing and making it possible. You made this possible for Cromana to support this, and we thank you. And we thank you, PMC and Dynasty Media, for supporting us. So you have a very strong rest of the week, rest of the month, rest of the year, and we are going to get behind you and help that next 25 million of volunteers New the Dream.
Thank you. Thank you all so very much. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you.